Welcome, everyone, and good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're joining from. Thank you for taking the time today and joining us for our webinar, Winning with E-Commerce in Uncertain Times. My name is Martin Kaufman. I spent over 25 years leading businesses and building brands at companies like the Gillette Company, Procter & Gamble, and Estee Lauder. And I am with Kinetic Consulting now since 2 years, and will be hosting this webinar together with my two colleagues, Guillaume Picot and Jean-Christophe Font, who will quickly introduce themselves.
Okay, so I'm Jean-Christophe, please call me JC. So I have an HR executive background over the last 30 plus years across automotive, healthcare, and food and beverage. And lately, before joining Kinetic 18 months ago, I was at Nestle, and I was accompanying the digital transformation, especially from a capability building perspective. And now I lead the organization, culture, and people practice at Kinetic Consulting. Welcome, everyone. You're muted, Guillaume.
So hello everyone, I am Guillaume Picot. I am a consultant at Kinetic in digital e-commerce and transformation. And I have over 20 years of experience working for large corporations like GE and Ford, working for startups, and working for online retailers.
Great. So our topic, digital transformation and especially e-commerce, they have been a hot topic since a number of years, of course. But since early 2020, things have changed in an unprecedented way at a speed and acceleration never seen before. Obviously, much triggered by the pandemic. In a few minutes, we will hear three guest speakers we're bringing to you today. All three are experts in e-commerce, senior business leaders, well-seasoned, and they've been very successful in developing their e-business in different industries. And that's why we definitely wanted to share or have them share their stories with you with some key insights and learnings for everyone. Now, before introducing them and hearing how they turned really a threat into an opportunity, Guillaume will engage us with a couple of facts on e-commerce to set the stage.
So let's start by a short and fun quiz, just to really understand the magnitude of what happened last year in terms of e-commerce growth. I'm going to ask three short questions. So you'll have a window popping up with a question. You will have 4 choices, so you'll have to pick one of the answers. And then I'm going to share the result with you. So let's start by the first question. So first question, what was the growth rate of e-commerce sales worldwide in value in 2020 versus 2019? So was it 12%, 19%, 24%, or 27%? I'll give you a couple of seconds to answer. Okay. Okay, so the result was 27%. So just to give you a comparison, the previous year, the growth rate of e-commerce, so in 2019 was only 12%. So second question. So we cannot talk e-commerce without talking about Amazon. So by how much percent did Amazon grow its sales in 2020 versus 2019? Give you 1 second. So we're going to share the results. So the answer is 38%. Just to give you an idea of what it represents in terms of extra growth, $106 billion in additional revenue for Amazon. So just to give you a quick comparison, the total revenue of Carrefour, which is the third largest retailer in Europe, was 90 billion last year. So Amazon in extra growth did more than Carrefour in total revenue. And the last question for you. So as there's a couple of people from Great Britain among the audience, question on the UK. So by how much percentage did online food sales grow in the UK in 2020 versus 2019? Okay, we're almost there. So we can share the result right now. So the answer is 79%. So again, just to give you a comparison, the growth of e-commerce in UK was 46%. For food, it was 79%, which means that food was one of the segments that had the highest growth in e-commerce last year. So back to Martin.
Yeah, that's impressive numbers. And obviously, different industries, different companies were prepared differently when it comes to e-commerce. And that's why, obviously, we want to have those three guests sharing their successful stories with them. There is still a number of companies from what we've seen that are prepared okay for their e-commerce, but not great. And obviously, it's a no-brainer then even after the pandemic, e-commerce is going to continue at a different level than it was in 2019. A framework we use at Kinetic, which is typically something we have in our marketing and commercial practice to turn business objectives into results for growth, has proven to be as critical in context of e-commerce as it has been before. And it's really focusing on the what we call the who, what, how. Essentially, it's really a consumer and shopper and customer centric approach. And it is really the starting point from everything we've seen. If you start with a who, whether it's consumer or shopper or customer, it's about having those key insights on changes related to their needs, their values, and their behaviors. This is specifically also valid for e-commerce. If you have your who, your strategic target or your subsets of prime prospects very well defined and decent insights, you will know what they like, how and where they're going to be most receptive when it comes to communication, whether it's social media or other media you're using. You will want to know how they want to order, how they use potentially an omni-channel environment, and how they want to buy, how they want to be delivered things. And that is really very relevant in the e-commerce context as well. So obviously that then leads to the rest, the what and the how, the what very much being about your brand equity, what you want to stand for in the hearts and minds of your consumers, shoppers, or customers. And then, of course, the how is always key. At the end of the day, the how you execute is the only place where your strategy really comes alive at all touch points and from end to end. And we're going to hear a couple of really impressive things. So we will now hear how our guests have really applied that successfully and what other things they've done. And here we go. I have the pleasure to introduce to you Stefan Moos, Chief Digital Officer of the Calida Group, Belinda Kelly, Chief Marketing Officer of the Handmade Soap Company, as well as Guy Hipwell, former Chief Digital Officer of CNA, but also an investor, a non-executive director, and founder of the Table Partnership. So let's start with Stefan, who will give a short introduction of himself. Stefan.
Yeah, thanks for handing over, Martin. Yeah, I'm Stefan. I'm basically doing now e-commerce for more than 22, 23 years, and either in management positions and large, big organizations, also in e-commerce, the several hundred millions of euro of revenue, or on the other side, in consultancy roles. And right now, as Martin mentioned, I'm CDO of the Kinetic Group, and as such, I'm also general manager of our e-commerce division, which is located near Munich, with more than 200 people. And for those who probably are not that familiar with the Kinetic Group, Kinetic is a holding with consisting of 5 brands. The brand Kalida, probably known by many of you. Also the brand Millet and La Fuma, outdoor brands in France, and also a very iconic lingerie brand located in Paris. It's Aubade, and also a spin-off of the La Fuma and Millet outdoor brands, La Fuma Mobilier, and they are basically doing outdoor design furniture.
Thank you, Stefan. I just want to say that from our initial conversation, I consider you to be really a pioneer in e-commerce yourself. I mean, you've been strong and investing into that business early on and created some, I mean, broke some ground in some areas. And in that instance, I hand over to you, really asking the question if you can share with us what you did at Kalida specifically to drive e-commerce so successfully last year and even starting before.
Mm-hmm. So then we start with the next slide, or?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what did we experience at the Kalida Group? I mean, many of you have seen it, and everybody has experienced it. Our market then has changed really rapidly since a few years now, and we do really see a big change and shift in our distribution channels. And I think it's quite impressive to see our e-commerce share right now. It's 21 or close to 22% in 2020, and only 5 years ago it was 3.6%. So we can really see that our market has changed significantly, and also our channel mix has changed significantly over the last years, which means that, of course, this has some really big impact on our company and our structure, and also on our distribution channels. This means, on the next slide, Martin, please, that we really changed the way of thinking our business, and we had to change the way of thinking our business, because you cannot just ignore the change in the distribution channels, and we had to accept that some channels like retail and wholesale are really decreasing, and other channels like e-commerce are probably, if you want to grow for the future, then you have to really place all your jetons maybe on this channel. So what we did in order to anticipate this change, we started 3 initiatives. One was that we really said that e-commerce is playing such an important role to even buy a specialist, a company specialized on e-commerce back in 2017, which we integrated in our group, which, as I mentioned, is now consisting out of 200 people. Back then, 4 years ago, it was only 80 people, so you can really see that the growth already. This was one major initiative. Then number 2 was that we started to restructure our existing business by also managing the traditional channel, retail, and also wholesale with a different perspective. Try to control and be more self-controlled in our distribution mix, and doing things like vendor managed inventory, as we experience also that our customers, our wholesale customers, started to change their behavior, and also stock management and so on. And we said it might be better also from a brand perspective to have more control on this channel. And in addition, we really put our the consumer, not the customer. This customer means like companies like wholesale. Consumers for us, it's the D2C, the end consumer. we said we have to change our mind and also our activities and put the consumer into our center, with really focusing on the consumer's needs. And on the next slide, we can see what does this mean, because for us, I mean, as we have 3 distribution channels like retail, like wholesale, and also e-commerce, but there's only one consumer, and the consumer has maybe several touch points for us, and we have to make sure that he has a kind of consistent consumer experience. And our guidelines for doing this were that we are, of course, we had to execute the basics like omni-channel newsletters, for instance, with drive to store and drive to web content. Also put some omni-channel loyalty programs in place, having click and collect and so on. But these were the basics, and trying to think about things people and consumers would expect from us as well. But by doing this, I think it's essential that we probably don't do everything what might be technical feasible, but to really focus on things that are bringing real added value to the customer. And just to give you 2 examples of what we have done in the past, and how our interpretation is of bringing value to the customer is on the next slide. And I just brought 2 examples. One is our endless shelf approach, as we brought tablet into our stores to support our retail staff in their daily work. So for us, it was important that you don't lose the personal touch and the personal experience with our retail stuff, because people expect that, especially if you look at our target group, which is female, around 50 years old. So you cannot just bring some smartphone apps and say download the app and then you get an entirely new shopping experience. For us, it was important to make this the combination of the personal experience and touch and modern technology. So we empowered our retail staff with this tablet so that they have, for instance, more detailed information about the customer and the customer loyalty program, and information about what has this customer bought in the past. And in addition, they have access to basically the whole e-commerce product range, and they can offer it to the customer in store, and offering them to ship and deliver directly to their homes, or if they prefer, they can also come back and pick up the products. And by doing this, I mean, this tablet is, I would say, definitely constantly in use. We introduced it 2 years ago, already 7-digit sales volume within the first year. And our success was that by using this tablet, the units per ticket increased by 20%. And in the same time, we were able to reduce the stock volume by 20% per retail store. So this was, for us, it was quite a success, and also with very, very positive consumer feedback in the stores, as they are not doing this more or less alone, but really have a guided shopping experience, a kind of enriched shopping experience. And second example from our point of view is, I think many of us have seen it in the last month. We also started to bring this kind of store feeling to people's home by having live streams, which more or less presents new products, trends, and so on, so that you can experience new products in a relaxed surrounding at home, in your living room, and so on. And also we got very positive feedback, actually, and these are just 2 examples of what we changed in our whole organization. As I said, it's only few examples. We have done a lot of more things, but on the next slide, I think just to share some challenges we had to face in the past. Of course, you have to take some investments, and this is it is really an investment. It doesn't start from if you start from scratch, then you have to build up the whole infrastructure, and it feels like a conversion of an aircraft in climb, and this is, from a financial point of view, it's kind of a burden, because you have to continue your existing big business, and in parallel you have to and also restructure your existing business, and you have to create more or less entirely new business in parallel. And this means, by introducing a new channel, new rules, new way of acting with customers, this of course means that there are some channel conflicts, which is one of my major roles, probably, to manage these kind of channel conflicts, as you have very different expectations of wholesale, online, and retail customers. Sometimes about pricing, about campaigns, availability of goods, and so on. And also, it's quite a challenge by bringing in this new sales channel and bringing in new technologies and bringing new way of thinking and approach to customers. It was not, I would say it was a challenge, bringing this fail fast and fail cheap behavior, just testing things. Maybe don't do everything with this kind of Swiss perfection, but really start doing things and then see what's happening, becoming more agile, and also having this minimal viable product thinking in mind when you start doing things. I think this was, as we are not a startup, as we are a traditional company, this was as well quite a challenge, but without doing it and without having this kind of approach, I think we would lose too much speed. So it was also quite important, necessary to introduce this kind of working methods into our company. Yeah, I mean, this was just in a nutshell what we have done basically, and we see definitely the whole change as a big chance for us for the future. And we are convinced that with the infrastructure and with the know-how we have built up in the past, that we have really great chances for the future, and the future for us is always bright.
Thank you very much for sharing, Stefan. I think you made a number of really interesting points from my perspective, which are showing things that, yes, you need to understand your consumer, and you know, a very nice example of your target group being rather 50 plus, and how they embrace, you know, for example, online or not, and how you bring it closer to them, as well as this being a constant investment and not a one-off, where you look at very short-term return on investment. I think it's really a strategic commitment, and a number of great things I've heard from you. Well, we would love now to, and I'll hand over to Guillaume to hear our next guest.
You muted, Guillaume.
So, Belinda, the Unmade Soap Company had a fantastic year in 2020. I know that your online sales skyrocketed. You also started your expansion to the US. I know that providing an outstanding customer experience from end to end, to navigation on the website, to unboxing, is key to your success. So maybe before to share with us what you did to provide this customer experience, can you tell us, Belinda, what is your background, what you did before to join the Unmade Soap Company, and tell us a little bit more about the company?
Yeah, so I'm Belinda. I've been in marketing for about 20 years. I started my life off in Coca-Cola, and I was there for about 9 years, and then moved to the alcohol industry into Bulmers and Magners, and then finished in Jameson. So a lot of drinks industry, FMCG, brand building experience. I then left Jameson and opened my own lovely restaurant, which I'm sitting in now. And I found that it wasn't really, the restaurant wasn't a full-time job. So I ended up working with the Handmade Soap Company in January of 2020, not knowing the year that was going to come ahead of us. So just to give you an idea of the Handmade Soap Company. So the Handmade Soap Company before 2020, they've been around for 10 years. It's a beautiful story founded by Donna, who used to be a Thatcher, and the Thatcher business wasn't really doing well in Ireland. So he started with 2 pots in his kitchen making soap, and he built the business up for 10 years up to 2020, and 2020 really transformed the business. And the 2 things that we had going for us into 2020 that then accelerated us was our story. We had a great story to tell, and our products. And our products are 100% natural. We have EcoCert accreditation. They're all vegan. So they are premium personal care products. And he is on a sustainable journey to make these the greenest products in the world, or the greenest brand in the world. So to start you on the journey that we had in 2020, I was going in to build up the marketing team, and overall in 2020, most of our business when we were going in was in retail. So 89% of our total business was in retail and 11% was online. So we on 2020 overall grew by 122%. But actually, when you look what we did online is where the real conversion happened. So in online, we grew by 1,949%. So the pandemic hit for us in Ireland, everything closed down on the 16th of March. The 19th, 20th, 21st and 22nd of March for the handmade soap company was mind-blowing. There was orders coming in out of our ears. We did in those 4 days what we did the year before we did in 4 days. So for us, really, it was about getting ourselves set up right. And, you know, the biggest learning curve for us was making sure and putting the consumer at it. So our big thing is always about, we want the consumer to have the best experience, but how do we get that right? So in the back house of things, we had to make sure that we had our delivery elements right. We had to set up whole new systems to make sure that the consumer was being communicated on every element. We had to set up customer care departments. We had to make sure that when they came to our website, it was ease of experience and that they were able to navigate the site correctly. Now, remember, we were, again, the first company in Ireland to have hand sanitizer on sale. So that's what was driving the traction to our site. And we were getting all these new consumers coming in. By the end of 2020, 75% of our consumers coming to our website that year were new consumers. So if you just move to the next slide. What we did after, so I'm not going to dress it up in any way. Those first 2 months were just, let's get ourselves through these 2 months. And after that, we really reevaluated how we were doing things and make sure we were set up for the future. So it became around this moment, this unboxing moment. How do we make sure that every consumer has this whole experience of unboxing our products and just loving them? So it was about, you know, setting ourselves up with the right delivery system, making sure that all of our staff understood what we were trying to do. So when they were packing the boxes, they were packed with love and care. They understood that this was for an individual and each one had to be packed with care. There was a huge mindset shift, and I think Stefan alluded to it earlier as well. There was a massive mindset shift in the business. There used to be 10 people in the business before the pandemic hit, and then there was 72 people. So there was a lot of training that had to go on in the background, that everybody understood that we were trying to deliver the best experience we could. Obviously, production and all that had to come on board as well of, you know, we had to get all of the products ready and get out. And then the other jobs that had to be done on my side is we had to get all those new consumers to our website. So things like making sure we were correct with our SEO, our communications out, creating great funnels as well. Once we got those 75% of new consumers, what was our next step with them? So we set up, when people came to the website, and this stuff might seem quite basic, but it actually worked quite well for us. They had to sign up to our newsletter, and that meant that we had constant communication with them. So we would put them down a funnel. Donna has a great story. We have 4 emails that then transition out telling that story, because these were new consumers to us. They didn't really know the brand. And then they went on to our monthly newsletters, which were sent out 4 times a month. Our social media then grew. We grew our audience by nearly 20,000 people. So it was making sure that we had our digital ads correctly, that we were targeting people with PPC. Google Shopping came very important to us, making sure all the commerce was plugged into our Facebook and our Instagrams as well. And also making, I suppose, we weren't the only online experience. They weren't just coming to us as well. We had a lot of retailers that were working with us. Their doors were closed. They wanted to sell our products online, and we wanted to make sure that the experience that the consumer was getting on our online experience was the same that they were getting. So it was working with those retailers to make sure everything was all one. The next part then for me, and this is probably coming from my pure brand marketing background, is if we just move to the next slide. We wanted to make sure across all of our platforms that we were speaking to everybody in the same manner and getting our core brand message out there, which is kindness comes naturally. So it's kindness in, kindness out. So for every touch point, we made sure that our campaign was live and that this message was going out to the core consumer. They were starting to fall in love with the brand. They were getting our message. They were getting what our brand was all about. And also we really understood, because, you know, we never had the amount of data that we were getting now with 51% of our total business now in e-commerce. We started to really understand who our core consumer was. And then we started to really delve down into, this is how we target our older consumer, which is now probably mostly retail, but we recruited a massive audience that were much younger. So we recruited a lot of those 22 to 40-year-olds, which we would never have really had in the brand. And that was due to where our distribution points were. So we had a whole new consumer set. So we had to make sure that our campaigns were talking to those consumers in their channels at the time that was appropriate. So all of our results, our engagement levels up on our social media are quite strong. Our conversion rate on the website is up at 8%. Our average sales orders are up by 20% year on year. So all of our mix is after shifting, and the business is after shifting. The next big thing for us was then, well, what do we do with this? So we launched in America before Christmas. And again, that's been a big learning curve for us. We've actually slightly pulled back because we went all in at the start, and now we've started to target that more regionally. And while we have moved 50-50 nearly e-commerce business, what we've realized for us in particular in the US is that where we're having success is that when we're listed in retail outlets like Detox Market, we start to build a hub around that. And that's when our e-commerce started to work. So if we're in the retail stores and they start seeing us in either Detox or Ulta, we start to build a base around those footprints of stores, and they start becoming, getting to know the brand. So our biggest challenge in the US is actually brand awareness. In Ireland, we have massive brand awareness because of our online presence and because of what happened in the pandemic. The next level in the US is to grow brand awareness. So that's a whistle-stop tour on the Handmade Sub Company and our success in e-commerce.
So thank you, Belinda, for sharing all this with us. So the importance to understand your customers, to engage them with the newsletter, engage them on social media, to have a consistent communication across channels, and of course the importance of the unboxing moment, because your sale doesn't end when you made the order online, but when the customer receives his box. So now I will let Jean-Christophe introduce Guy Ipwell.
Thanks, Guillaume. So now let's, if you can, yeah, thank you. So now let's have a conversation with Guy. And Guy, you've been accompanying e-commerce transformation over the last decades, the last 2 decades. And it would be very interesting, I mean, for participants to the webinar to to understand about your experience about, over the last 2 decades and how you saw the critical challenge of being successful in digital transformation evolving over the last 20 years.
Okay. Well, thanks, JC. Yeah, so I've worked in retail for 30 years and e-commerce for 20. So back in the late 90s is when I first started. Before some of the brands I was working for even had transactional websites, they just had brochureware. So this was very early days. And I guess I've followed that journey along from e-commerce to multi-channel to omni-channel to now, the whole digital transformation topic. And I think that the evolution has been rapid, more rapid for some than others. And I think there have been some forecasts that have been wildly wrong as well. I remember the year Y2K issue where there was big panics, and then of course we've had the pandemics, and so there have been things that have changed the landscape very dramatically. But I've not seen anything until the pandemic in terms of the speed of change. And I now work with multiple businesses. So previously I sat on the boards of businesses like Harrods and Liberty in the UK. I was the CDO for CNA across Europe, and I also launched Fashion ID for Pick and Kloppenburg in Germany. And I think what I have seen talking to the businesses over the last year is no one has sat in the middle. No one has stayed as they were. It's not been kind of ticking over. They've gone in one direction or another. Either rocketed, and interestingly enough, all the statistics you put at the beginning were about growth, and certainly what we've heard from Stefan and Belinda are about great success stories. But also there are other businesses that have just gone completely the other way. Their business has switched off. And I guess for me, fortunately, or how I want to describe it, I'm the chairman of a business that suffered from both. And this is a non-alcoholic spirits company. It's quite young, but growing very rapidly. And Belinda has obviously more experience in the drinks market than me. But the majority of our business pre-pandemic was all to do with on-trade. So it was all with restaurants, hotels, the hospitality sector, everything. This got shut down. Went literally overnight to zero. On top of that, we were going through a funding round, and we had a term sheet, and the investors got nervous about the pandemic and pulled the funding. So we went from being in a good, high growth position to everything stopping. And I guess the key learning that I have seen, not only from this, but also from the other businesses that I'm working with that have done well, and when I say well, yes, we're talking about triple-digit, quadruple-digit growth, is they've had the ability to react very quickly. And I think Stefan mentioned the word agile. Typically, everyone thinks about that in terms of the IT function and agile development and Scrum methodology. But the agility for businesses to change and adapt at speed, I think, is becoming now a real differentiator. And certainly for the spirits business, Lyres, we saw this happen to us. So we completely shifted to e-commerce. We dialed up the whole D2C channel. We shifted the marketing spend. We pushed onto Amazon and grew at a phenomenal rate. And now, obviously, as the unlocking happens, the other channel is coming back. I think but this growth for I think the majority of businesses, and Belinda alluded to this, is that suddenly growing at rapid speed puts a lot of pressure on the basics. These are the things that they're maybe not sexy. A lot of people obviously get excited about the sexy stuff with e-commerce or digital transformation that you can do. But what I've seen where people have really been struggling with this hyper growth is in things like the technology platform, the placing of orders, the handling of the volume of orders, and then of course the distribution. And you look at the way that is then fed through in terms of being able to process the number of orders at speed, still ship them. The consumer has the same expectation. You've got to get them out the door. Then cancellations and returns, which I have seen a lot of cancellations where the demand has gone up, or missed demand, and because then there wasn't enough stock to fulfill the orders, there is a huge missed potential as well. So although the growth has been rapid, it could have been even greater. And then really you look up the supply chain, and there's been things like Evergreen, which has then impacted on the pandemic even further. And now that's where I see huge challenges where people are trying to recover because the supply chain has come under massive pressure. So hypergrowth is fantastic. You know, there's been some phenomenal results, but it has put immense pressure on the organizations. And those that haven't been able to switch fast enough and dial up the basics have really, I think, struggled to keep up with the demand.
And Guy, I mean, you spoke about dramatic change at dramatic pace, and often when we look at driving change, one thing which is critically important is how do you align at the top? And my question to you is, how do you see the importance of an alignment on mindset from the top so that it ripples down in the company? How critical it is in the context of such e-commerce transformation?
Fundamental. It's absolutely critical. I think this is the key element. You know, I think that Stefan mentioned channel conflict or something along those lines. You know, the economic models of your different channels are not the same. And suddenly seeing a massive swing, it fundamentally changes your business model. And I think that you have to have, you know, to say things like we're going to be customer centric is great, but actually you need to think, what does this mean? Because it will change some of the aspects of your financial model, which will then change the performance of your business overall. And leadership here is key, absolutely key. Because quite often within the organization, we hear it a lot, you know, siloed organizations. But when you look at this, there are in fact competing objectives. You know, if one is doing well, there actually means the other is not doing so well, and they're competing. And at the end of the day, the customer doesn't care about the inside of your organization. Yeah, they don't care if that budget was supposed to be for online or offline, or it was from someone country over here or whatever. They typically just buy from you because they love your brand, they love your product, they want your product. And there is when the basics come in. You know, being able to get, because when someone checks out, the expectation is that they have placed their order, you've accepted it, they're going to get it. And this, you know, naturally puts a conflict right from the top, even at board level. You know, what the CMO wants and the CFO want maybe are different. You see massive top line growth, you've got different channel participations, which might mean that actually your bottom line figure, there's a big swing in that. And therefore, you know, that is going to affect things like your availability of cash. And, you know, it's really key that these topics are discussed at the top and then followed up from the top as well. Otherwise, you'll have teams further down in the organization who are confused or who are competing. I think you have to. This is very, very much about strong and decisive leadership.
Thanks. And we spoke a little bit about mindset. I think listening to Belinda, listening to Stefan, we heard about the importance of, you know, learning fast, failing fast. We heard about the pace. We heard about agility. What else have you seen? What else have you observed about being critically important from a culture perspective to make this e-commerce transformation successful?
I think those points that you mentioned are absolutely right. You know, don't be afraid. I think the most dangerous thing is to do nothing, yeah, or to procrastinate for too long and come up with so many reasons why it can't work, or aim for perfection. You know, when other people are then aiming for you know, good or great or good enough, and actually then come screaming past you in the outside lane because you're waiting to delaying everything until it's perfect. So the mindset of, you know, let's just get stuff done, and again also understanding being able to prioritize that stuff, about what does the customer really need versus, you know, some of the stuff we've all, I guess, been there with software sales companies trying to sell us technology that is great, very clever. And I know I've deployed some of it myself. You know, I'm like, this is amazing. We're going to be the first, business doing this. And then once you've deployed it, there's like 3 customers ever use it. You know, because really all they want is their parcel nice and quickly and a great unboxing experience. And the mindset is actually, I have found one of the most challenging things to change within an organization. You can change the technology, you can change the structure. The culture and the mindset really, really takes a lot of work because everybody has to buy in. And if you don't get that, there will always be reasons not to do something. Someone doesn't believe in it fully, they're not behind it. And as I said earlier, from the customer's point of view, they don't care about your internal problems. Sort it out yourself. It's not their problem. You're lucky to have them as a customer, and they could take their business elsewhere. So I think that this is, this really is something that companies have to grab hold of. Is this mindset to say we've got to make decisions faster, get behind something. If it's wrong, we'll adapt.
And similar to the importance of mindset, I mean, often when we talk with companies, the question is, well, we don't necessarily have the capabilities, but where do I get started? How do I get started? And we heard from Stefan, we heard about, okay, because we don't have the capability yet. I mean, let's invest and acquire, this online company to accelerate our capability buildup. What have you seen? I mean, is there a best approach, I mean, to build internal capabilities? Or have you seen that depending on the company, it can be different? What would be your recommendation to someone who
I'd say sorry to interrupt. There is an ongoing discussion about build versus buy, right? Particularly in terms of the technology. I think that really one of the key factors to consider when you're making these decisions is okay, well, how long will it take us to do this? And really look to do the best that you can at the fastest speed that you can without it being an utter disaster. So you cannot just completely throw all caution to the wind. But again, this is all about referring back to perfect is the enemy of good, and often, particularly I think it's more challenging in larger organizations. The decision-making processes are too slow. Because they have to filter down through the organization, go through several committees, and then when you work, as I'm fortunate to work with organizations of all sizes, and the ones that are able to make a fast decision, get on with it, try it, get it out there, then they do test and learn, and sometimes fail completely, but actually rarely. Normally, what actually they do is learn. And if you don't do anything, you don't learn anything.
And maybe a last question for you. When it comes to the organization, we spoke earlier about the alignment from the top, and we know that when the top is not aligned, it easily leads to creating silos within the organization. How do you see, I mean, the kind of silo-led culture or silo-led organization being potential risk, or being potential, catalyst for such kind of e-commerce transformation? What is critically important?
Yeah, breaking the silos is hard. It's because you really have to think about the ultimate objective of the business and get everyone aligned. And that may mean, often when I look across, these silos businesses tend to operate in functions, which means that they run down like this. I'm very lucky in that when I work with businesses, I can go horizontally. And what is then interesting is you then see individual KPIs being met. So everyone thinks they're doing really well, and everyone is doing really well according to their KPIs. But actually, if you compare the KPIs of one silo with another, in fact, they may be competitive and not driving towards the same goal. So in fact, what you get is a divergence instead of a convergence. And that's why I think this is the difficult conversations that need to be had at the top, to say, okay, right, if we're really going to believe in this and go for this, it means we're going to sacrifice 1 point in margin, or we have to do this or that, and then remodel the business, because fundamentally the model is changing, and as the channels change, but also as other elements of your business model change, be it internationalization, be it through acquisition or anything else, you can't rely on the model that you were running for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And the pandemic has shown that very clearly.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Guy. I mean, for sharing all this insight. And earlier, I think Martin was presenting, I mean, our kind of framework when we say that it's super important to be clear on the who, who do we target, being clear on the what, and being clear on the how, and what we learn, I mean, from our own experience, but also from what you said, Guy, but also Stefan and Belinda, in the importance of these three key enablers: the organization, the culture, and the capability. And from an organization, the ability, I mean, to have an organization which is not, siloed, where, there is clear delegation, clear empowerment within the organization, so that, things can move fast. We spoke also about the importance of culture, and you said quite rightly that mindset is probably, I mean, what is the most difficult to change, and how do we create, this culture of, learning fast, failing fast, this culture of being agile, this culture of being empowering the organization, because you can't drive digital, by controlling everything. Digital is the contrary of controlling everything from a culture perspective. And last, capabilities, and back to this key decision about do we buy, do we build? And from what we heard, there are different companies, different answers. So it's for each and every one, I mean, to make sure that we ask the right question for our own company, so that we enable this transformation. So thanks for all of your insight. And now I hand over back to Guillaume. You're muted, Guillaume.
We are close to the end of this webinar. So I would like to ask Stefan, Belinda, and Guy just two very quick questions. So I will just ask you to answer very shortly. So first question is, what is the one thing your organization did that truly step changed e-commerce in 2020? So who wants to go for it?
Shall I start, or?
Sure.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's interesting to see that this is more or less closing the loop to what Guy has said just a few minutes ago, by saying that you probably all of a sudden experience some pressure on basics, and we as Kinetic Group, we were lucky to be ready. We had everything in place, all processes, the company, the know-how. So we were able to just push the throttle when the pandemic came, because 2020 was clearly dominated by the pandemic, and we were able to grow in certain months, to grow by 200, 300, and even more % on a monthly basis, which is really, was a big challenge for us just to do it. But we were able to push the throttle, and we had full trust of the whole organization, because they had to close down stores on the other end, and we started spending a lot of money, more money than actually was budgeted. But we were ready, and I think this was clearly one of our biggest success pillars last year, to fill the vacuum in the market when other players withdrew or had to stop for at least 1, 2, 3 months, or really had to stop in their spendings, and we were able to do the opposite. And I think this was for us clearly one thing that really changed our e-commerce in 2020.
Okay, thank you, Stefan. Maybe Belinda, in a few words.
Yeah, so definitely ours was our agile decision making. We were such a small company and things were happening so fast, but it was myself and Donna, the founder, worked together just to make those decisions quickly, so that we could just move on and make sure that we could fulfill all the orders coming in, but also transform the business into what it was shifting to, which was an e-commerce business. So it was the decision making for us.
Okay, so we have 5 minutes left, so I will move quickly to the second question. If you had to do it again, what would you do differently, and why?
So same order, I guess. Yeah.
As you want.
Guy, just to make sure we're not missing out Guy here, because if Guy, you had a point to add to the first question, please go ahead.
Well, I think it's covered by the other two, and I think that, you know, from my perspective, the biggest one was to shift channel, you know, instantly and double down on e-com. So it was just that immediate decision. Okay, we had no other choice, right? One had gone to zero, so it was okay. Deploy all our resources. We switched, you know, our people focus, our money, everything, capital, all human capital, financial capital. We moved it all from where it had been budgeted to a completely different position. So that's the answer to number one. And if you want, I'll start with number two as well. Differently, I think, in terms of the of all across a variety of the businesses that I'm working with, greater attention to the basics. And because this is where they've struggled, right? As suddenly the oil has been poured on top of the fire, this is when they start to notice the pressure points lower down. So I think earlier, with hindsight, earlier attention to the processes and procedures and ensuring that they're able to cope at scale would have been certainly useful for many businesses. They've coped well, but you know, it has not been entirely painless.
Wants to go next?
Well, for us, I think as it was really such a successful 2020 in e-commerce, I think would have done probably almost everything exactly the same, but maybe anticipate, and this is something we experience now, anticipate that the growth is not over yet, because people did not just all of a sudden go back to traditional shopping behavior. They just keep on going and keep on shop online, and even more than you would really anticipate, or as we anticipated. So I think what we could have done maybe a little bit better was just to say, okay, how how would people act when the pandemic is over, or when we are moving ahead? And I think we can be much more optimistic probably than at least we have been. Maybe we have been a little bit too cautious now, but we see is now that people just, they don't stop doing it.
Okay, and lastly, for me, definitely what we would do differently is one of the skill sets that we were missing was a senior procurement manager. That skill set has now been hired, but I suppose some of the things that Guy was talking about within the supply chain, if that experience had been within the business, some of the stuff that we're left with, the decisions that we made probably would have been done differently. So yeah, it's having that procurement experience in the business earlier would be one thing we would have done.
Okay, so thanks to all of you. I hand back to Martin for the last few words.
Well, first of all, thank you to all of the panelists here and our guests, Guy, Stefan, and Belinda. Some really, really good insights. A number of things we've seen as well when we dealt with clients, but you know, just having those real life examples that clearly really helps. And I hope that our audience will be able to take some of those things away to really implement right away. We had a number of questions coming in that I think have been answered quite well, specifically through the last part. And there's been a lot of questions around, for example, build or buy. How do you start or really accelerate e-commerce? What's the role of leadership? And I think we heard it from all of you very clearly that leadership mindset is absolutely key, driving it from the top, breaking up silos. I think aside the typical technology questions, this has been one of the key things that people are concerned about. How do we make that happen to break up silos and accelerate that? So thanks for what I personally found an extremely inspiring and insightful session. Thanks for all of your time. And thanks a lot also to all participants and their interest. I'm not sure if this is going to be something we can do, but I hope we will be able, with your okay of all of us, that I think we have to kind of make this webinar accessible for a second run for people to listen who couldn't attend today. And with that, I'd like to close and thank everyone and wish you a great rest of your day and week. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.